Thank you so very much for being with us today. April 2nd, it's 1 year anniversary. You might be asking, like, why are we doing this on April 2nd? I think for Deann and I, it's like, we could either sit at home and cry the entire day, or we could come celebrate with you guys. So we want to come celebrate because we recognize and understand that God works all things together. And we, I think, with Natalie's situation, is kind of like a living example of that, of God's faithfulness in the midst of hardship and tragedy and difficulty. We want to take time to spend together and celebrate with you guys. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us. And we just want to give you a little bit of an insider's perspective. I think if you're following our Facebook page, you've seen and heard lots, and we just maybe want to give you a little bit of the director's cut, I guess. And so we've made a couple of videos today in order to give you some of that perspective and kind of where our hearts were and let you follow that journey. So I hope this is informative and gives you even more appreciation of God's goodness through this difficult time for us. Enjoy.
So some of you might even be wondering why Natalie had to have a procedure. And at about 4 months old, she was just acting kind of odd. Curtis was out of town, and we were living in Valencia at the time, so I was just hanging with my parents. My grandparents were in town here in Palmdale, and couldn't really get her to eat. She was sleeping a lot. I was having to wake her up. And other than that, she was happy and playing, but the Lord just kept prodding my heart that something was wrong. So I actually took her to just an urgent care in town just to see if they could. I told my mom, at this point she's dehydrated, so let's just get her some IV fluids. And they basically said I was a first-time mom, do you not know that she's fine? And then didn't really do a very good evaluation of her. So I ended up going back to my parents, and just when I woke up the next morning, I just said to my mom, this kid is not fine. Something is wrong. So I ended up calling our pediatrician in Valencia, and he said, just bring her right in. And once he started a thorough eval of her, he just said, her heart rate's so high, I can't even count it. And it just kind of thrust us into calling 911. And I remember calling Curtis and calling my mom and just saying, I don't know what's going on, but they're calling an ambulance. And even in the ambulance, the paramedic tried to tell me, these doctors overreact all the time and she's fine. And then as soon as he listened to her heart rate, he started hooking her up, and we went over to Henry Mayo, and it was like a movie scene of I'm standing off to the side and all of these people are converging on our daughter. And I was actually fine until they started to put the pads on her in case her heart didn't restart. And then I was like, I'm not fine anymore. They stabilized her there and transferred her to Northridge Hospital, and she was in the ICU, the pediatric ICU there for about a week. Curtis flew back graciously, spent the extra money.
I was in Alabama at a national soccer tournament, and I got that phone call, and man, talk about your heart dropping, the call that I got is, I'm going to the hospital. Things got stabilized, and you don't have to come back. And I was like, yeah, right. I got on a plane and got back there. And that was really hard, walking into that room, seeing your daughter just strapped up to all of this medical equipment. So,
but thankfully, we went home with her on one medication, and she was taking that a couple times a day. Had a couple more bouts over the next couple months where her heart would get stuck in a high rhythm, 280 beats per minute, and it just gets stuck. It just can't come out without medical intervention. Even from the beginning, the long term was, this is the procedure that will be done when she's at a safe size and a safe weight. And it's so simple, it's so minor, it's outpatient, and yeah, let's keep her on this medication until we can get it done.
Yeah, so we met with the doctor over the phone, and all kind of came together as a conclusion that, yep, let's go ahead and do this. She's at the right size, the right weight, the right age. And so we put on the docket for Good Friday, April 2nd, 2021, to go ahead and do this cardiac ablation, and that's where our story begins. Even on the day, the night before the surgery, I was going to one of my players' weddings. And so I'm driving down there to the wedding, and we're trying to make a decision, like, do we go the day of? We just drive down there. It's, beat traffic. You have to be there at 6 in the morning anyway. And for some reason, God just said, like, no, let's let's get down there. Let's make it special. Let's take her. Let's go to a hotel. And so we went down to Uncle Doug and Aunt Angelica's.
Well, and even on the way, that was when she's in the back of the car. I remember exactly where we were. We were approaching Avenue S, and she goes, "Mommy, do you think 250,000 people are praying for me?" And I was like, "Oh, honey, I think that number's a little high, but all the people that love you are praying for you."
So we meet at, I come from the wedding, they come from home. We meet at Doug and Angelica's house. We kind of meet up, say hi, get a chance to spend some time together, pray together, and then Deann's favorite place to eat is Panera. So let's go to Panera. So we drive over to Panera and just get some time together as a family, which was really sweet. We drove down to the hotel. Normally we try and get our kids to bed right on time and everything, but we're like, she's gonna be sleeping all day. Let's let her stay up. So she's playing in the bathtub, making all these fun noises and sounds, and you even did a video of her explaining the surgery. But there was just some sweet moments before what we didn't know was going to be the chaos of the next several months. Some sweet moments of spending time together.
We had gotten a stuffed animal bunny for her, and she got tons of stuffed animals before this procedure. But we had bought her one that we wanted to give her, and it had a little voice recording in it. And we had recorded something, but then that night we said, "Hey, you want us to redo it?" She had been drawn to a new song, "When I'm Afraid," and halfway through, I called her over. She started singing it with us.
Yeah, that was sweet. So we still have that. If you ever want to get teary-eyed, you can come to our house and listen to the bunny. You know, hindsight's always 20/20, so to be able to look back and see the grace of God, even in the midst of difficult things coming, and that bunny, right? That was a last-minute purchase that you did, and the staying at the hotel, staying up late. Yeah, just some sweet, memories together. That was really, really cool.
Well, I didn't sleep well the night before the surgery. You...
I sleep everywhere. I'm passed out.
Curtis and Natalie slept fine. We woke up,
early.
He woke up, and we got ready. We brushed our teeth, packed our bag. Natalie is passed out. We even did a video of her. We're talking to her. She was just...
spread eagle.
So we got her up, basically just picked her up. She was snuggled up with Curtis, carried her down to the car. We were talking to her in the car. Since then, I've been able to ask her if she remembers this. She doesn't remember at all going to the hospital. The medication that they give her prior to surgery wipes out short-term memory. So she remembers the night before in the hotel, but she doesn't remember going to the hospital. I remember Curtis asked her, only one parent would be allowed, so I was going to go in, and he said, "What's one thing you want me to have when I come to be with you?" And she said,
"An orange."
An orange. And we're like, "Honey, seriously?"
Chocolate,
I don't even think that's something that she
No.
frequently eats at home, but that's what she said, an orange. So Curtis said, "I'll bring you an orange." So we get to the hospital. I get out of the car.
Yeah.
Curtis gets out of the car.
She literally just says, I don't want to. It's almost like she sort of knew. I don't want to do this. And it's stupid COVID, right? So I literally am standing there with my wife and my daughter telling me I don't want to do this, and they have to walk in by themselves, and I have to leave. And that was unbelievably difficult.
So we went in, we checked in. We had to go to an admitting area. There was a big fish tank there, and Natalie stood at the fish tank in her pink unicorn PJs and some new sandals that Auntie had given her. And then we walked to another area where they weighed her, and then they took us up in an elevator to the pre-op area with another boy and his mom. They walked us into the pre-op room, and it was a huge, huge room that was kind of like oval shaped. And they walked us around, dropped the boy off, and then brought us back around where Natalie was gonna wait. And they had, the kid scrubs. So we put those on her, and they were huge. But she had her little unicorn toys in either hand, and we just sat there and waited. I wish I would have known that would have been the last time that I could talk to her for now. That's where all the doctors came in and introduced themselves, and that's where I met Dr. Tan for the first time. He was the head anesthesiologist for the surgery, and the heart doctor came in and saw us again, and for Natalie's appointments, we had her bring a joke. And I actually don't remember her joke for that day, but she had a joke that she shared there.
And they gave her the juice to drink before surgery, and I took her to the restroom. And when we came back out, they told her they would have a popsicle for her after surgery. She said she wanted a red one. And then they let me stay with her. They rolled us away, and I was with, there was an African-American woman, and she said, at the 2-hour mark, I'll call you and update you. And she got my phone number. And at that point, still only one parent could come in. So I had told the heart doctor, you know, I might have to be outside because Curtis and I want to be together. So he had said, why don't you go down into the cafeteria, and if Curtis can get in, then I'll come and meet you guys there. I don't even remember the path we took, but I was holding Natalie's hand, and I was talking to her, and she was loopy as could be. She had her bunny with her. I got to the room, and I leaned over and I prayed for her, gave her a kiss, and I wheeled her in. I remember thinking it was a huge room. And then the nurse started walking me to the elevator, and I said, is this the place that all the parents cry? She told me they would take care of her. And I went down the elevator and sat in the cafeteria. And Curtis tried to get in, and they wouldn't let him come in, so we ended up meeting outside, walked over to Starbucks, walked back, and it was about that time I was saying, okay, they should be calling me soon.
Yeah, we were sitting in the, I think it's called the healing garden. I don't know if it's the healing garden for us, but sitting in the healing garden and drinking our Starbucks, just trying to get time together and pray together. And yeah, I just sort of wait for the time. And
Talked to Doug.
we talked to Doug. The phone call, it was late.
Yeah, I think I was starting to get more nervous than you were.
Yeah, I don't think I knew a lot of the inside story yet. The phone rang, and Deann picked up the cell phone.
So the surgery started at 8, so they were supposed to call me at 10. They perforated her heart at 10:02, and it took about 15 minutes to stabilize her. So that took it to 10:17, and that was before they even had cut open her chest. So they called us at 10:36, and I remember being relieved that I saw their name pop up on my phone. So I picked it up, and
The guy's voice.
it was a guy's voice.
Poor Kenny.
Kenny. And he says, is this the parent of Natalie Lewis? And I said, yes. And he said, where are you? And I started to panic.
Her face went white. Like I knew something wasn't right at that moment.
And I said, well, we're outside. And he said, do you know where the surgery waiting room is? And I said, no. I told him, you know, we can't both go inside. They won't let us both go inside. I finally said, what's going on? What happened? I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said there were complications in your daughter's procedure. We need to get you. And so both of us jumped up, and I said, we can't both get inside. You need to come get us. He started talking, and I mean, there's people all around us. And I remember saying, is she alive? And his answer was, right now she's alive. So he told us he would meet us in the lobby, and I hung up. The healing garden is just around the corner from the lobby. And I told Curtis, call your dad. And I called my mom and my brother, and I three-wayed them in. And I said, you need to pray. Something happened. And so we didn't even remember to put on masks. We just went running into the lobby, and we don't even know who we're looking for. As soon as we saw him, he was coming from the left, and we were on the right, and we just started waving at them. And they came over and got us, and I mean, there's just people everywhere. And I remember just saying, where is she? What happened? What's going on? And they said, we'll tell you, let's get over here. And I said, no, tell us right now. So they ended up cutting through this extra room, stopping at a couch, and there was a doctor with the nurse, and they said they perforated her heart and they were having to do emergency surgery. So they took us up in an elevator and took us back to the cardiology floor where I had taken Natalie for the appointment, and took us into a really small room where we waited
For a long time. I mean, doctors kind of started coming in. I think they brought a chaplain.
I remember when I finally realized, I mean, it should have been a no-brainer, but that they had to cut open her chest. My mind was not at all on brain injury.
Yeah. Brain injury was not even remotely in our thought process.
They were very hopeful that she would just wake up and be fine.
So it feels like we're in this little small room for hours, even days. Like it just, time kind of just,
At one point I left and was like, is anybody gonna come back? I went and asked.
Finally, the heart doctor came in and sat down, and we had met him over the phone.
You were over the phone.
Because of COVID stuff. So we knew that this was the heart doctor, the one who did the surgery, and you know, he sat down. I legitimately didn't know how this conversation was going to go. Like, we just spent hours of high emotions and low emotions, and you go through all of my anger and fear and I just didn't know, you know, here's the man who just did surgery on your daughter.
At the very end of what he said, I'm so sorry this happened.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting being a pastor. You know what you ought to say, and you know what you really want to say. What you really want to say is, I don't like you right now. I hate you. What did you do to my daughter? But my wife, I think through the power of the Spirit, collected herself through tears and said, today's Good Friday. Natalie has trusted Jesus as her Lord and Savior. We know where she is going. And if this turns to your salvation, it's worth it. And I didn't like you very much. As a fleshly, worldly, earthly husband, I didn't like my wife at that moment. And yet the Spirit had to come on me and said, isn't that what everything's about? Isn't that the big picture of every story, of you, of me, of Natalie? It's about salvation. It's about God's glory. It's about the rescue plan of His children.
I think I struggled with what I had said after the fact, though, because it was hard to realize Natalie's life might have been worth it, but was her brain worth it? Like the fact that we still had life, but that the brain was injured and it seemed to be so severe, and it was in the next following weeks, it was easier to feel like, man, her life would have been worth it. But now to see what we had, it was like, whew, this is harder. It's harder to see she has life, but does she have
Quality of life.
quality of life? And even at times when he was so faithful to come and see us,
Daily.
there were times that I would have that bitterness or frustration with him, and as soon as he would walk in, God's grace would just wash over me, and we would give him a hug and welcome him in. And
I remember he had another surgery that day. It was either that day or the next day when we saw him. It just like this I mean, I'm kind of a hugger if you know me, but there's this sense of, man, this guy just went through a ton. Yes, us, yes, Natalie, obviously, but man, the weight that this guy is going under. And I remember going in, all the doctors and everything were in there, and I just kind of went up to him and gave him a big hug. And I said, you know,
I think you said, we don't blame you.
yeah, we don't blame you. Like, you need to be able to have a right mind for your next surgery so that you can go in there and do it right.
I think the following week he had come and told us he had the same procedure, and he said the girl looked just like Natalie.
Yeah, blonde hair, little pipsqueak. So again, it's God's grace. Like, I think we've had so many people say, oh, wow, look at your faith, or look at this, or look at that. And the reality is it's just God's grace. It's like, are you going to sit under and accept the grace of God, the filling of the Spirit, the allowing you to be used by Him, or are you going to reject it and allow your flesh to win?
But honestly, looking back on it, I think, how did we go through all of that? It amazes me now.
Yeah, one of the things I think, kind of hindsight 2020, is being able to see maybe the pathway that God sort of leads you down, and the grace in that pathway. I mean, it was like a really simple procedure. So Natalie just had, it was SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, with WPW, Wolff's Parkinson's White syndrome. So SVT is kind of like this overarching umbrella term. WPW happens to be a subset of that. The electrical pulse can go the wrong way, causing afibrillation. That's why she had to have the surgery, but it's like the most basic, right? It's just a cardiac ablation. They just take these wires, go up in
The femoral artery.
the femoral arteries, and go from there. So really, we are like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. We actually didn't even know if we were going to tell her.
I had reached out to Andrea Maldonado Dieter and just kind of asked her, like, how do I encourage Natalie through this? How do we kind of guide her? And she just encouraged us, like, what an opportunity to shepherd Natalie. And so I made like a Facebook event and had asked friends to post videos just encouraging Natalie. So every day I had a couple of videos lined up for her.
And she loved them. Like, she would be waiting for those days and watching the videos and being able to really be encouraged by so many people. And I think it kind of just got out of hand. Yeah. I mean, before long, you had, Clint, head of Awana. They were setting up things. Rochelle Akers is setting up things. Kaylee Klein setting up things.
Pastor Caleb and Leah brought T-shirts with Jan.
Yeah.
We had T-shirts, and then they
did
had
family pictures.
They asked Laura to do a family picture, and we were like,
it's just outpatient surgery. Like, why is everybody freaking out?
Yeah, but she was scared.
Yeah, she was scared. And our church family, like, really, really came alongside of us, even pre-surgery, to make it. I remember at Awana last night, they had this huge card, and everybody, like, signed on it and that kind of stuff. Is really, really sweet to kind of see that. Doug, Natalie's uncle, had already started preparing, because he coached with me for a long time, my entire soccer team alumni, praying for Natalie.
I think he asked for 4 people to pray every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
4 different people. But then it was a huge blessing because, one, if we hadn't told Natalie, then nobody would have known.
Yeah.
So then it would have been blasted out, something went wrong and people would have thought,
What
is going on? 2, it was like just immediate prayer warriors. People knew exactly what was going on, and they just fell on their knees for us.
It exploded. It was like from you and I finding out to like hundreds of people finding out in just a matter of minutes. Mm-hmm. So again, God's grace, like, he totally, like, paved the way, knowing that, this little girl's gonna need a lot of prayer, and he was gracious in doing that.
So after we saw her, I remember I walked right up to her, but Curtis kind of like V-lined for the corner. It was really hard for him to see her like that. And she started waking up that day. They were putting in an EEG sensors all over her head and a net, and she started to respond. So through Saturday and Sunday, she started moving a little bit more, which seemed very positive. She squeezed my hand at one point. I had asked her, Curtis gave her a kiss, and I said, "Does Daddy need to shave?" And she squeezed her right hand. That was pretty awesome. And I think everybody just hoped Sunday, Easter, that...
What a great story, right?
Yeah.
Come on, God.
that she would rise as we celebrated Christ rising from the dead.
At this point, I don't think I still fully understand maybe like the brain stuff. I think I'm still in the mode of the heart and the chest
Just
and
the trauma.
The trauma.
She was still intubated, and we were looking forward to her being extubated, but as Monday rolled around, they said, "We're not seeing the reactions that we want, and we want it before we extubate her, we want to get an MRI." And so Tuesday was the MRI.
Yeah, so we go back, they do the MRI, they take her, and then we can just wait for results.
Yeah, you took me to Curtis was having to stay at different hotels. They let us stay together the first night, and then he was staying at different hotels. And so he took me back so I could get a shower. And I remember they had to call me for something when we were at the hotel, and I freaked out.
Yeah.
I couldn't even answer it. It's too much trauma from the first phone call, so Curtis picked it up, and I think it was asking for approval for something. But we went back. It was kind of interesting because the heart doctor heard the results before we did, but he thought we knew the results. So he came in to kind of console us, I guess, and we said, "We don't know the results," and you could tell he was...
He's like, oh.
But it was God's timing and sweetness,
Yeah.
because the neurologist was a little difficult for us, and so to hear it from him was easier.
Yeah, I think the heart doctor, I mean, like we said before, he literally was there every day, spent time with us, and not just like minutes, like hours with us. which was just really, really sweet. So to have him be the one accidentally tell us, I think was needed. Neurology is a unique breed of doctor. We even tried to, what are the results? Is there anything positive?
Yeah, when neurology finally came in to tell us, she just straight said, the daughter that you knew is gone.
Yeah.
And the basal ganglia that controls the motor movements was greatly hit. They said it was worse than they had anticipated, given that basically their checklist for when a brain injury can happen or cardiac arrest happens was just everything was check, check, check. No problems for a brain injury. So she said she had been very hopeful that it would be minimal, and she said it was just global. It was just, they said it looked like she had been underwater for 15 minutes. Curtis looked at the MRIs. I didn't want to see him. The ICU doctor was there, the heart doctor was there, and the neurology doctor. And I said, well, what areas weren't affected?
Everything was affected.
None. Yeah.
Everything was affected.
And I said, well, we're going to praise God for this. That doesn't mean we like it, because we obviously didn't like it. And then the ICU doctors walked us down the hall to sit on a nice little couch. So we had just been told the MRI results. So this was Tuesday evening. And we're just sitting there on this couch in the corner. And she just said, tomorrow when we extubate her,
we need to talk about what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And at first I'm still like, what are you talking about, lady? And she's kind of like, well, we need to talk about, like,
if she can't breathe on her own.
Yeah, if she can't breathe on her own, what are we going to do? Do we allow her essentially to...
Well, she said we could intubate her again and give her another week and see if that makes a difference. But she said after that, you guys would have to decide what you want to do. And so we said we would let her go.
Which are like the hardest words to even imagine as a parent, to have to kind of...
Well, and our family hadn't even been able to
Yeah.
come in, so we were asking questions like, would siblings be able to come and say goodbye?
Yeah. Yeah.
Siblings and family.
Yeah. So our family didn't know, so we're dealing with a lot on our own behind the scenes.
Yeah, so we had let family know about the MRI results, but we had kept that second conversation to ourselves. So I was still staying there every night.
At the hospital.
At the hospital, and Curtis we were still trying to get Ronald McDonald set up, so he was finding a hotel each night that people were helping us with. Natalie was increasing in agitation, so they were throwing more and more medications at her. So they call it storming, and it's basically like muscularly, Natalie is completely like locked out in pain, arched neck backwards, feet completely.
Kind of like if you were to be electrocuted.
Yeah.
Everything is just fully extended and locked.
Extended and locked. And just every time the nurses would come in to try to help her, I'm jumping up, and it was probably 3 a.m. I ended up calling Andrea Dieter, and she finally said, Deann, do I need to give you permission to leave? And I said, yeah, I just can't. I was...
Mental breakdown.
Mental breakdown is definitely what happened. I just couldn't, it was like that feeling of, I gotta get out of here, like I can't. Which is, you feel horrible.
The guilt. It's like this.
Feel horrible leaving her.
But there's nothing you can do.
You can't even hold her. She's just so locked out. You can't even, like, hold her body. So I called Curtis, and fortunately the hotel he was staying at that night was really close. So I think by the time I got downstairs, you were already there.
I was there.
And I went back to the hotel with him so I could get a little bit of rest.
I remember getting up in the morning and, man, just in the shower, just having this overwhelming sense of God saying, you need to let her go. And I remember really specifically walking out of the shower and just saying, I think I sat on the bed and I said, Deann, I think God's asking us to let her go. That's hard. As a dad, you're supposed to protect. But I think the hope is that God loves this child more than we do. And so we got ready, hopped in the car.
I remember praying, God, give me the next breath. Give me the next breath. It was just was so overwhelming. So we went back up, and they came in to extubate her, and they had an emergency.
That's right.
So I think that was earlier in the morning, maybe
Yeah.
like 9 or 10. Came back later to extubate her.
Early
I-
afternoon.
I don't even. So our family knew that she was being extubated, but they didn't know.
The extent, they didn't know the behind the scenes conversations.
Yeah, they didn't know the extent of how much we were holding our breath for that moment. And they pulled it out of her lungs, and
She didn't breathe right off the bat. It was kind of like and it's like you're like almost leaning in, like, do it. And then
she started breathing.
took a breath. I just remember in the back just be like, yeah, you know, like.
I don't even really remember that moment. I remember like anticipating it, but I don't remember what I did or. So she was on that floor a couple more days, and then they moved her to a normal peds floor, and the storming just got worse. It was
Bad.
It was horrible. It was horrible. I literally remember texting some of the ladies one morning here from church and said, I'm praying God would just take her. She's just writhing in pain in front of me, and there's nothing I could do. And they're throwing like drug after drug in her body. She's moaning in pain. We had gotten into Ronald McDonald, so Curtis had Titus and Haven there, and I ended up calling him saying, I can't be here alone with her. I need you to like call my dad and have him pick up Titus and Haven so we can be together, because
It was
really rough.
like just almost like bent backwards. Like she just looks like a U. And so just the tips of her toes and the back of her head and the noises, the groaning and the pain, man, that's an emotional toll.
I think it was another moment too that you don't want to leave or go anywhere, but I just couldn't. It was overwhelming. And later I actually had a nurse stop me in the hallway and say, I had gone back to Ronald McDonald the night before with Curtis because he had Titus and Haven. And she said, we just tried to be there to comfort her, and they were playing the bunny. They had the bunny, and she said, it was very obvious when we played that song that she recognized your voice. And she said, we just advocated for her. The doctor came in and said, this is just her normal. This is the way that she's going to be.
Those
And
nurses fought for her.
that nurse said, this is not the way she's going to be. And they stood up for her and they comforted her. So they advocated for her in a way that we couldn't at that point.
Didn't even know about.
At that point, the way neurology talks to you, and when they come in multiple times a day, they literally describe it like Natalie had lost a limb. And it was like so definite, and so this is the way she's going to be, that even when people would pray that Natalie would be healed, I felt so brainwashed by what they said that I was thinking, didn't you hear what we told you? Like, she's gone. It's global. It's everything. There's nothing, even when we asked them about neuroplasticity and the brain rewiring, they said there's no place for it to rewire.
It was
just
too damaged.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I remember that day that she was storming so badly, our friends came down, and there's a Vaughn's parking lot right there, and they just stood and prayed. And that was amazing. Curtis and I took turns going and looking out the window.
You just needed it.
Just needed to feel like you weren't alone.
Yeah. Doug would come every day before work and pray. It was interesting that same day, things are not good, and a nurse came in.
Yeah.
And literally just started preaching at us. And it was so needed. You know, God is good, God is in control. You know, continue to walk. We know that you're Christians. You know, don't lose heart. And I don't know if I ever saw her again.
No, I don't think I did.
You know, like, who knows, maybe it was an angel.
So I remember they finally stabilized her in the afternoon. And neurology came for another lovely conversation where they pulled us into another small room. And I had reached out to Andrea again and asked, would she just take notes for us so that we didn't have to try to do multiple things at once. That was a real blessing too, to just have those notes of what they said. And I remember Curtis saying, if she can't do anything, like if she has no quality of life, like why do we sustain that? And they just said, well, she's breathing on her own now, so there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. They said their hope was that she'd be able to smile and
Experience
yeah,
joy.
experience joy in whatever that means.
If you could take her to the beach, or she
Yeah.
could see a sunrise or a sunset.
Yeah. Which they said the word see, but they thought she was blind, right? With cervical blindness. So like, it was just a crazy, again, neurology, like no hope at all. I remember leaving that and reading what Andrea put together and just like, wow.
So in that meeting with them, we decided to, so because her muscles were so locked out, her organs were going to start shutting down, because it's like running a marathon. Like, you don't stop running a marathon. Your body just starts producing things that the organs just start to shut down. So she was moved to the ICU, the pediatric ICU.
And they just drugged her.
Yeah. And we had said, so at this point, I don't think I had seen the kids. Or I guess I had seen them when they came down, but I hadn't seen Colton. They said this would be a good time for you to go spend a day with your other kids, because she was totally out of it.
So we went, that was Griffith Park. Took the kids to Griffith Park and hiked up that hill. I mean, the kids don't really know what's going on.
We didn't even know what to really tell them, because it's like, I guess at that point we had a former player who came and visited us. She's a nurse in the NICU there.
Yeah.
And Kristen Richards. So my mind was turned when she said, Deann, I've seen 2 kids with the same MRI, and one is sitting up and talking, and one is just a body in the bed. And she said the only difference I see is the family's interaction with the child. And so that was all I needed.
Let's go.
To just say, okay, like, if we can impact change here, if there's hope to impact change, then let's do it. Because when she was storming, we just thought, how do we take her home? This is traumatic for us to watch. How do we take her home like this for our other kids to see this? And it was just a really, really hard conversations to not know how you're going to move forward, and how do you explain that to your kids when you don't even know
how to explain it to yourself. And so the journey is taking what neurology says and pretty much chucking it out the door. I mean, the hope needed by Christ and his people, and prayer and support. I mean, people sent us meals, Uber and Grubhub, and the whole church came down one day and just prayed. Those banners stayed up for almost our whole time there. And we had to walk past that every day. I remember seeing the banners and being blessed, encouraged, walking past, seeing Natalie's room and praying for Natalie as we walked back to Ronald McDonald.
Classical Conversations had all written her cards, so we taped them all over
Everybody knew Natalie's room because
we had
cards everywhere. And it's beautiful. The body of Christ is beautiful. And I never would wish this upon anybody, but I do wish that people, that the average Christian, could feel the love of the body of Christ like we have. Pretty amazing. We wanted to give you the kind of the director's cut of Natalie, and there have been so many unbelievable conversations, gospel opportunities, relationships built. When we went home after they really sedated her, Dr. Tan.
So Dr. Tan was the head anesthesiologist in the procedure.
Yeah. And he came in and he bought her a little bear with a prayer thing, and he prayed psalms over her. He promised me, go home, I will be with your daughter. So that was really, really sweet. So
he had started praying over Natalie. He said Natalie's procedure, as far as, everything going smoothly, simple, was in his top 2 of going south really quickly. I mean, obviously you have times that trauma situations are coming in, but he said of things just going perfectly smooth, routine procedure, and just going wrong in a second was in his top 2.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just kind of gave us a true understanding of this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Shouldn't have happened, and then they weren't sure if she was going to make it off that table. I mean,
And I don't know if I really realized that.
Yeah.
Because she just got immediate care, so you just think, she's right there. Like, there's no delay. But he walked through the whole procedure with us one night. And I remember when he said, we weren't sure if we were going to get her off that table.
Yeah.
And it was like, whew.
Yeah.
And he had another anesthesiologist that was working with him. And she had come in, and I met her when we were in the CTICU, the first floor Natalie was on. And she just shared with me, this was before we knew the MRI results were not good. But she said, we don't normally intubate for this procedure, but I just thought, she's so tiny and petite, I'm just going to intubate her, which was a blessing from the Lord that was already done when things didn't go well. But she was really traumatized when the results came out. I would tell Dr. Tan, tell her to come back. And I know he would pass that along, but she wasn't coming back. She was having a really hard time.
Had to take time off work, I think, and just the difficulty of that was intense.
So the day that they were moving, you weren't with me. I was with the nursing staff. We were moving Natalie from the pediatric floor to rehab, and they take you through this like secret tunnel, and we're doing turns here and there and everywhere. And I remember we turned right, and my eyes locked with this short woman. And I always thought, if I see her, am I even going to recognize her? They have the caps on and the masks on with the surgery. As soon as we both saw each other, we just knew. And I could tell, like, she was right next to the doors, so I think her first impression was, I want to get out of here. She'd been avoiding us for so long, and there were several nurses with me, and we just stopped. And she's a little bit shorter than I am, and we just hugged. And I remember telling her, it wasn't your fault, that Natalie was making so much progress, and just got to let her see Natalie. She was just there, and I literally felt like I was in a movie scene. Like, just the emotions
looking,
of just nurses
around.
Just standing there, like not knowing even the interaction, not knowing who she was or why I was having that interaction with her. But man, I also thought, what did God have to ordain for me to cross paths with her in this private hallway? Yeah, that people aren't just allowed to walk into. You'd have to be with an employee. And God ordained that timing for us to pass, and for me to recognize her, and for me to just be able to speak truth to her. And I actually had one of the nurses text me later and just say, that moment was amazing. Just those sweet moments that God was so gracious to us in revealing what he was using us for behind the scenes, and just allowing it to be real for us.
Because you don't know why God is doing certain things. What nurse is coming to you today and why? What doctor's interaction. I mean, for us to have coached Kristen Richards, and for literally, she was the only person that could come in to encourage us, and she was able to be with us and spend time with us, and that was unbelievable. Other nurses, Bev, just watching Frozen, the nurses who would almost fight over, being able to primary for us and serve us.
Becca and Madison.
Yeah, just amazing. I think the story, it's really touching, right? I mean, I think it really wraps people's hearts and want to see her succeed. I mean, I think people
they
are
just
fighting for her.
they see bitterness in people when tragedy happens, and God was just gracious to us and allowing our hearts not to be bitter.
Yeah.
And I just remember even that first day when it happened, we just committed to one another that we wouldn't blame one another.
Yeah.
There was nothing we could do. We had made the decision together. And usually I just took Natalie to the appointments, and for that appointment I called Curtis, and he heard everything that I did. And I was very thankful for that we had made that decision together.
Yeah, and the friendships that get built through suffering, right? The heart doctor had some sweet conversations with him over the time, and he's still interacts with us quite regularly.
Weekly, at least weekly.
And that's
He listened to your sermon
Yeah.
in December.
it's fun to be able to send him some of my sermons, and
What did he say? It was the most hopeful sermon he had
Yeah.
ever listened to.
Yeah. So it's cool to see how even in the midst of pain and hurt and suffering, I think the insider perspective is God. Like God is going to work things because God is bigger than suffering. He's bigger than pain. He's bigger than these difficulties. And so that's something that's really, really sweet. We've been on this crazy journey, been thrust in this crazy journey. And I think I did a podcast with Pastor Caleb. We talked about all the different new therapies and everything that we're doing. But it's been amazing to have to really learn a ton. And then, the practical grind of needs that our family has now is crazy.
So we came home in July, and I would say August, September, October were rough. Were super rough months. Natalie was vomiting on a regular basis. I mean,
Choking.
she was sleeping in our room. We would be jolted out of bed in the middle of the night to her choking on her spit. I mean, for a while, every morning was like her gagging and choking on her spit. I mean, you couldn't even leave her alone for a second because it felt like when you left her alone that she would start throwing up, and just didn't have the coordination to put herself in a safe spot when that happened. So it was, you were living on anxiety and adrenaline, just waiting for the next moment that, you had to jump into action, and it was exhausting.
Yeah, we have had, obviously our church family has jumped in, has been amazing, but our families, the amount of time and energy and flights and driving and being with us and serving and praying, like prayer warriors, that's been unbelievable to watch and to see and experience. And the Facebook page, right, over 9,000 people. Even yesterday she was having trouble going to the bathroom, so I posted, I think, an hour later. It's just the power of prayer and the community that we have is pretty astounding.
And once we had come home, I was following up on some things that people had sent me and connected with a Hope for Brain Injury Facebook page and started seeing some of the things that people were doing. And we had like the hyperbaric chamber mentioned to us, but hadn't seen any success stories right in our face. So that's where we really decided that was a direction we wanted to go. Yeah. And I would say that was
the best decision.
The changing point was when Natalie started going in the chamber. And then we did an intensive therapy of primitive reflexes. So we've really gone into a more of a holistic approach of weaning medications and primitive reflex therapy, the hyperbaric chamber, supplements, and organic formula, and all of this stuff to...
Pretty much everything opposite of how I eat is we're trying to do with Natalie now. The hyperbaric chamber was the game changer. I mean, she was really nothing on her left, and then that got in. And the issue is because the brain injury continues, right? The swelling and the secondary injuries in the hyperbaric chamber just compresses and deals with inflammation and forces oxygen into the plasma and stuff. It really are, like, we're learning a ton. And
You're learning. I just do what you tell me to do.
God's been gracious and even, putting people in our lives that are maybe a little bit further beyond us will.
So one family that we met from the Facebook page, their son, Robert, had a non-fatal drowning 4 years ago, and we reached out to them, and Will is now walking and talking, and so we said, tell us what you did, because that's what we want to do, and they're believers, so that's a huge blessing. But we still talk to them periodically. I talked to him yesterday, and it's just been a huge source of encouragement. He was the first person that said, like, start weaning off medications, and we were like, what?
Because I think, in your mind, at least in my mind, it's like what the doctor says is true, it's right, it's what you do.
Right.
And I think we've really learned is that doctors practice medicine, and especially in pediatrics, a lot of the drugs are actually not drugs for kids. They're adult drugs that they sort of just do. And
the last drug that she's on is for Parkinson's patients. Yeah. So obviously not meant for kids.
Yeah. So, and then the celebrations of some of the successes.
I would say like December was the turning point.
Yeah.
And Natalie before that had dropped down to 29 pounds. mean, even when you carried her, she just felt like a bag of bones.
Yeah. She looked it too.
And so she's back up right around 33, and smiling and laughing. She can sit and play with her siblings.
She can see.
She can see. She, basically she's eating by mouth. So she basically eats by mouth all day, and then I'll give her a little bit more in her G-tube after she's gone to bed to just try to help gain that weight back. She's able to walk a little bit with assistance. She's like putting herself in a crawling position, getting her hands out where before this left arm was locked out. Now it's supporting her. She's doing schoolwork with us, so I have ladies that come every day to help with schoolwork so that we can do Natalie's schoolwork and Titus's schoolwork, and she's coloring better, coloring in the lines, and starting to really get some of that dexterity down to hold a pencil, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing if you go back and remember what we were told, the body in a bed, hoping that she can smile. Like every celebration is pretty much everything that she's able to do. Go to the bathroom on her own, laugh, watch movies, enjoy. It's really shocking and almost scary that if we would have just believed what neurology had to say, I think we'd be in a really different place. So having faith, having hope, having a support team and a family of believers around us, surrounding us look, you guys are here today, right? I mean, the joy of being able to celebrate a tragedy.
Well, we can see what God was even doing when he brought us. We were living in Valencia for several years, and we just felt like we need to move back, be closer with our church family and our family that lives here, and that was just a blessing from the Lord. My parents just stepped up and took the other 3 kids for all of those months that we were in the hospital, and we call on them regularly. Curtis's parents have flown out multiple times to help us, and aunts and uncles on both sides have just come out to just fill in the gaps, which has been amazing.
Doug has become like this prayer warrior. Like, you know what I mean? Like every time I call, let's pray, right? And it's just been such an amazing, encouraging. Life is not just about you. It's not just about Natalie. Life is about what God is going to do to his body and to his church.
There's still a grind, that's for sure. Like when we actually try not to leave one of us alone when Colton and Natalie are awake, because it's just
crazy.
It's just crazy. I mean, and I feel like Colton's the one that gets left to toddle her around by himself with long eyes on him, just because Natalie can fall, or she's kind of like a toddler now, putting herself in
A
precarious
6-year-old toddler.
Precarious positions. So there's times that it's definitely hard.
Yeah.
I had the kids in the tub the other day, and Natalie was sitting, but she slipped down, and you have to, grab her. So it's that hard moment where she's seemingly very stable, and then in a second, she's not stable anymore. And she wants to do so much. I feel like my mom can be the most critical, and she would tell you Natalie's receptive intelligence is intact, and that she comprehends everything that's going on, that she is able to take it in and process it in real time. It's just the output of being able to use your hands and your mouth, that she's still struggling with her legs. Yeah, it's amazing and hard coming up on the anniversary, because it's almost been nice to be able to look back to last year and the way Natalie was, and now we're coming up to
Who Natalie is.
But I think we lost a season. We definitely did not lose our daughter. We lost a sweet moment in time. Yeah. And so we're looking forward to what God's going to do in her. Every night when I give her that extra formula, I pray verses over her and whisper them in her ear. And just speak truth to her, because she needs a lot of courage. She's awake and aware enough now that she needs a lot of courage. Before, she was drugged enough that she didn't really know everything that was going on. But now she's awake and aware, and she gets frustrated too. And so trying to work through that and encourage her, and trying to explain to a 6-year-old, hey, we need the fight of an adult. Yeah. You got to keep fighting, and got to keep pressing on.
Yeah. Words are powerful. I think maybe that's one thing that you've really taught me, like the positive force of what words can do. Praying over someone, obviously, but speaking truth into someone and then watching someone respond to those words and that power and that strength. You know, Jesus came, he was the Logos, right? He was the Word, the flesh incarnate, and his word is powerful. And I think our hope and our prayer for this next year is that his word would become even more true in our hearts and our lives, and that Natalie would be able to proclaim his word, that she would get to a place where she can actually, maybe on anniversary number 2, we sit down and celebrate again, and she's actually here talking with us.
Even this morning in the car, I told her, Natalie, do you know what the word overcomer means? And she started to shake her head, so she goes. And so I just kind of talked about, want to be an overcomer. We want to overcome these obstacles that have come in our way, and it's like an amazing picture to think about her overcoming these things, and I think we understand that picture better than she does right now, but even painting the picture for her so that she knows she doesn't have to stay this way. For a while I would say, talk again? And she would sign. She signs no like this too. And I said, honey, you gotta believe that you can do it, and you gotta keep trying. Yeah. And so now she's starting to try more, and it's cool to see her get excited when she realizes she's doing more than she could do before.
Yeah. And I think our hope is that our story, Natalie's story, would help you to become an overcomer. That whatever your trial and your tribulation and your difficulties, that we would just be used as a catalyst to encourage your heart to lean heavily into the sovereignty of God and trust him. And
he's worth it.
He's worth it. And it doesn't mean that life's easy. It doesn't mean that it goes correctly or
that you live it perfectly.
Yeah, but we can through the power of the Spirit. We can live for him. And so as we finish our time in worship and celebrating this year of life that God has given our daughter and has given us and has given you, that we would worship really well together. Thanks
For joining us.